Hello, welcome back to the channel, and a slightly different angle to where I normally film from. So before I start, thank you to all those who've subscribed so far. I've now passed over that 4,000 hours of watched over the past year, so now I just need an extra 450 subscribers to get to the point of monetizing. So if you're watching this, please hit that subscribe button. So in this video, what I've decided to do is look at the problems with EV ownership, or what's being portrayed as problems of EV ownership, and discuss them and look at whether they're a myth or scaremongering, or whether they are an actual legitimate concern. And what's prompted this is there's been a few videos on things like the Fully Charged show, Driving Home slash EVM, which is a YouTuber up in Yorkshire, I believe around the Skipton area, who does a lot of stuff about EVs and green energy and stuff. It's basically they've been talking about the press portrayal of EVs from normally from the point of view of bad journalism, such as the recent article in the Mirror, Daily Mail, and I think the Sun, which talked about some woman who had a new car which wasn't new because it was from 2014, who put it in a hotel car park. The hotel car park flooded and the car was ruined, and these newspapers picked up on the story and made it into and said it was an EV, even though the car was a diesel Renault Capture. So they were talking about the bad journalism. What I'm going to look at is the actual legitimate concerns or myths surrounding them. And also what's prompted this is under my recent video about EVs, or owning my EV for a year, some of the comments I had under that. So the most common comment that I've had under whenever I've talked about having an EV is about fire. So one of the people who commented under my previous one was saying if you have an EV, or you should never park next to an EV and make sure you have a good fire extinguisher. So this is basically the idea that EVs catch fire. So there are, I would probably put this into the legitimate concern category, but quite a lot of it is scaremongering. So if we just look at the pure statistics of for every 100,000 EVs compared to every 100,000 internal combustion engine cars in the UK, more internal combustion engine cars will catch fire per year than EVs. That's the statistics of it. Of course, what that doesn't take into account is that EVs are much newer cars, and obviously petrol cars have been around for much longer, so there's older ones on the road, so that could account for some of it. We should also point out that the majority of internal combustion engine cars that catch fires seem to be caused by faulty electrics. So there is some. The actual myths that EVs just catch fire a lot it's difficult to actually compute whether it's actually true or not. What does seem to be true, though, is from fire brigades that tackling an EV fire is harder just because of the chemicals involved, but they're coming up with new methods to do that, to fight those fires. Another legitimate concern is that EVs have been known to catch fire when not in use, so in a driveway. Most car fires, which have been caused not by arson but by a fault with the vehicle, tend to occur when the vehicle is being driven. One of the myths, though, however, is how quick an EV fire spreads. Both a normal internal combustion engine car and EV car, if they are on fire, the fire will spread very, very quickly. So there are some legitimate concerns there, but with safety always improving, it's just with car safety overall, and people and also companies designing in fireproofing into the cars, I don't think it's too much of a concern. So this category is weight. So this comes from a story that went around in the newspapers a couple of months ago, which is that because electric cars are heavier, car parks are going to collapse. So there is, again, some fact behind this, that electric cars tend to be heavier than the equivalent internal combustion engine equivalent. So, for instance, my MG ZS apparently weighs about 1,500 kilos. The petrol version weighs about 1,300 kilos, so a couple of hundred kilos difference. What the article didn't take into account was that cars over time have been getting generally heavier anyway. The Fully Charged show did try to address this and did a really bad job of it. It was basically Robert Llewellyn having a rant where he was trying to say that the heaviest internal combustion engine cars are heavier than EVs, which yes, but those like really high-end Mercedes that weigh 3 tons are very rare on the road, so it wasn't a particularly good argument from that point of view. And then he was comparing it to a Model 3 Tesla, which in this class is one of the lightest cars because of their battery technology. So it wasn't particularly well put together, that rant or argument on the Fully Charged show. There is a trend for, as I say, cars being heavier. So if you look at the cars from the 80s compared to now, the cars are bigger, they are generally heavier. And we haven't had any real problems with car parks collapsing with that. So I don't think this is a legitimate concern. I think this falls purely into the scaremongering myth category. So got a couple of points now to make on batteries. First of all, batteries can't be recycled. This tends to be an argument from about 10 years ago when EVs were starting to come around, that batteries can't be recycled. And at the time that was reasonably true. However, when a market comes to fruition, so there is now a market to recycle EV batteries, technology will develop and companies will set up to do that. And now you can recycle EV batteries, so you can either just recycle put the battery to another use when it's not suitable for a car anymore, such as in a home storage battery or grid storage batteries. But there are also companies that have now developed electrolysis techniques to be able to extract the valuable metals out of a battery and the acids and everything else that's in there to make them work. So this is a pure myth in today's age. Okay, so the second one I'm going to address on batteries is that batteries have a lifetime and need replacing every however many years. Again, this is actually based in fact. Batteries do deteriorate over time. That's just a process of the chemistry involved. If you looked at batteries from, again, 10 to 15 years ago, it was more of a legitimate concern there. But now with basically battery management systems that heat the battery, so they're prepared for heat for charging, advancements in battery chemistry, the degradation of batteries isn't so great, so it can be used for longer. Also, there's a certain article that keeps being shown up about somebody who's had a fairly new EV and was then charged £13,000 for a new battery. So there's a couple of things to address here. Yes, if you absolutely hammer your battery, so if you constantly put it onto fast charging, charging up to full 100%, really abuse it in the driving style, then yes, it will wear out quicker. The cost is high to replace it, but again, if you did the same with an engine in an internal combustion car, that would also be a substantial cost, though that shouldn't be a pure argument against batteries, comparing it to some other car. But also there's going to be more batteries coming onto the market, as again there's going to be an emerging market there. So companies will be starting to make I don't know, was it third-party batteries that could be installed in cars and replace them, and the price of that will come down, and also the fitting will come down as well. Just a quick voiceover for editing. I should also point out that many cars now have a warranty on their battery of up to 8 years, which should cover most times. So another battery point here, that batteries contain elements which are difficult to mine or require mining, require child labour and all this sort of stuff, and come from conflict zones. So again, this was a legitimate concern several years ago, and the one that keeps coming up is cobalt, which is a conflict metal. Very few batteries now contain cobalt, and the amount of cobalt in them is absolutely tiny. So with lithium iron phosphate, there is no cobalt in there, so that works that out. People say about the mining of lithium, using children for it. Yes, there are going to be some countries with, shall I say, relaxed labour laws, which may be using child workers or low-paid workers to mine lithium. There are other countries that also mine lithium. I think the biggest biggest supplier of lithium is Australia, and that has quite tight, in comparison, labour laws. So it's a myth, but it does have some legitimate concerns. Obviously, mining these sort of metals does damage environment. Processing them does create greenhouse gases and require energy. However, the final point I'd like to make on this point is technology is again moving on. We will soon be in the region of solid-state batteries and sodium-ion batteries instead of lithium, and sodium is in abundance in the sea. So we may be moving away from that, in which case that removes that concern altogether. Okay, so I've left the big one till last. Is having an EV more green than owning a petrol car? So there's a couple of different strands to this. The first of is the production costs of making a car. So whenever you manufacture anything, it's always going to have an environmental cost, either in terms of mining the materials or the production of it, producing CO2 in, say, a factory. And that doesn't go away whether it's an internal combustion car, an EV, or anything else. EVs do require the movement of sort of metals around the world to get to different processing plants. So China has a lot of lithium processing, but I said the lithium is mined in Australia. So you've got that transport cost there. But again, if we're going to compare into fuel cars, then you have to mine the oil and move the oil around to fuel it. So it sort of swings and roundabouts. Again, the technology for producing electric vehicles is moving on quite quickly, and I think the newest Polestar, they're advertising that per car, their new production method saves 3 tonnes of CO2 per car compared to their previous one. So that sort of area is moving on as well. So it's difficult to actually fully categorise over the lifetime of a car, but, whether which one produces more CO2 from manufacture and use. Another point of this is where the electricity comes from. So if you go on the National Grid website, you can see how much green energy the UK produces. So if you're filling cars with green energy, yes, but it's always going to be a percentage, but that percentage is only going to go up over time. So it is becoming more green to run an electric car. So what the argument is, or where does the electricity come from, is going to come from a coal-fired power plant. Is starting to diminish. So it's still a legitimate concern, but it's becoming more of them on the myth side of the argument. Then you've got there is another point to consider with this, and this is just what's happened. The UK has decarbonised by moving its carbon-heavy industries to other countries and then importing. So things like steel production, or that a lot of that now comes from China, because basically we've moved our CO2 to there. The same thing with these with electric vehicles. So a diesel car or a petrol car does put out fumes, it puts out CO2, it puts out nitrous oxides, it puts out lots of gases, which are quite if not toxic, nauseous. And this is what's causing a lot of problems in cities, especially with there was a child who died a couple of years ago and that went to court, and it was basically high pollution areas around where they lived. Having electric cars does help solve that, because they don't, at the point of driving, there is no emission from the exhaust. There is still some tyre wear which produces particulates. There's still some brake wear which puts out particulates as well. Although admittedly EVs do have regenerative braking, so no friction braking, which does reduce those particulates as well. But as far as exhaust fumes, EVs in the city centre makes far more sense from the health point of view than an internal combustion engine car. But the CO2 to make those and make the power is somewhere else. Well, it could be to make the power is somewhere else, so it still has to be addressed. So again, slightly legitimate concern, more of a myth, or more turn into myths. So I haven't scripted this video, it's more me just coming up with the arguments off that I know and just putting them through. As I say, if you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe, and I'll see you again very soon.